So I'm going to jump right into the end of the gospel and just immediately take on that last sort of interesting saying that we hear in this gospel. Truly I tell you, among those born of women, no one has arisen greater than John the Baptist, yet the least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. And so the Gospel of Matthew is quite clearly differentiating between whatever John the Baptist was doing and what Jesus began. And into the mouth of Jesus are put these words. John belongs to an old order, and he does not really inhabit the new order that I am here to both proclaim and begin. And so how do I come up with that? And I think Isaiah is kind of part of the clue. Because Isaiah, we hear echoes of Isaiah in the Gospel of Matthew. When John sends words, "Are you the one to come, or should we wait for another?" The reply is almost a quote of what the signs of the kingdom are when taken from the book of Isaiah. But as these texts from Isaiah are brought forward, there are several important modifications that I think really hold some of the key to what Jesus meant when he said, of those born of women, John is right up there. And yet there's a different order of reality in the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven that I've come to proclaim. And so when we look at the gospel, or the lesson from Isaiah, it has all of those images of regeneration that are signs of the kingdom. But Isaiah also said, "Say to those who are of fearful heart, be strong, do not fear. Here is your God. He will come with vengeance, with terrible recompense. He will come and save you." This was a very prominent expectation that the arrival of God's kingdom would be, as we heard last week, John the Baptist saying, "Somebody's coming after me, and he's more powerful than I am, and his winnowing fork is in his hand, and he's going to gather the wheat, and he's going to burn the chaff." And when we hear the story of Jesus' ministry beginning in the Gospel of Luke, he unrolls the scroll from the prophet Isaiah, and he says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He has anointed me to preach good news to the poor, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And there too, the passage about vengeance is left out. Something theological is going on here in these passages as the comparison between Isaiah, who is, in a sense, pointing toward the reality of Jesus, but is not yet there, and Jesus himself. Jesus is doing something different from Isaiah. So the idea of a God who comes with vengeance to eliminate enemies seems to be a real characteristic of that old vision. And for Jesus, the relationship to enemies was rather different. He didn't say, "Let's eliminate the enemies." He said, "Let's rescue our enemies. Let's heal our enemies. Let's save our enemies and bring those with whom we are, from whom we are estranged. Let's restore the relationship. Let's bring people in." So, a very different point of view that Jesus is trying to develop. And then the second one, it might seem like a small point, but it's, "A highway shall be there, and it shall be called the Holy Way. The unclean shall not travel on it, but it shall be for God's people." And just think ahead to the amount of time that Jesus spent with those who were judged to be unclean. He says, "I come not for the virtuous, but for sinners. The doctor, I come for those who need a doctor." And of course, he was being ironic there, because the virtuous, the self-righteous were desperately in need of the opening of their hearts and minds. But they didn't know it because they were secure in their self-righteousness. So the whole sensibility that Jesus developed is, wow, these divisions between clean and unclean that divided the world in Jesus' time, those are mere human judgments, and they don't correspond at all to the way God sees things. Our human judgments are not relevant to how God sees things. And so those whom we might judge to be unclean are completely welcome on the highway of God. It is because, and as Paul especially brings out, we're all unclean. Every one of us is inattentive and self-absorbed and frightened in ways we don't need to. All of us are unclean in those spiritual ways. And if the highway of God has no room for the unclean, then it will be an empty road. It will be an empty road. And it is precisely that we are called from our confusion and fear and self-absorption into this new way. And of course, that's what Jesus, I think, has in mind when he says, "Blessed are you if you take no offense at me. Blessed are you if you'll let me shine a light on you and on the world in which we all live, so that we can begin to see it more clearly." Because the world enchants us all and gets us to say, oh yes, that is very important. That is very important. And again, the world operates on a scale of values that is completely out of keeping with the values that God would institute. The world does not reflect the presence of God. It reflects an insatiable desire for power and for money, and it identifies any number of completely spurious, false things that we should gather around and do what amounts to worship. It is so great. Let's just devote our country's money toward, and yeah, I'm raving because I'm thinking about trivial cultural examples. I love athletics. I love what athletes do. And I am so appalled at the obscene amounts of money that flow around professional athletics. And we are meant to be scandalized by that. Jesus would shine a light on that and say, do you in any sense think it's normal for somebody to earn, this is not in athletics, but it might be. I just read the head of the Blackstone Group. His salary last year was $800 million. And that's by no means the top. We're meant to be scandalized by these vast disparities of wealth, where millions of workers work 40 hours a week and yet can't pay their rent. But nothing will be allowed to touch that money that flows upward to an ever diminishing group of people that want it all. We're supposed to be scandalized by that, and not to invoke some regulatory agency to change things, maybe actually to invoke the only power that really can change things, which is the God and the Spirit of God who is in all our hearts. So it's not, I'm going to create an agency to redistribute wealth. Somehow I'm going to say, Zacchaeus, come down from the tree and change your life and open your heart. That's the Christian path of transformation. So when John asks this question, are you the one who is to come, or should we wait for another? I think it's impossible to miss that there's an element of disappointment. I thought you were the one, Jesus, but you're being pretty soft on the people that I wanted to kind of come down on. And Jesus said, I'm doing a different way. I'm doing a different way. And I've been sort of turning over in my mind whether the question that John sent to Jesus is also our question. Are you the one who is to come, or are we still waiting for another? And if we're not waiting for another, why are we so tentative and slow to put into practice those things that Jesus put before us? Those things that he said, your life right now is shaped by anxiety and fear. And if you want to be free from those things, do this and do this and do this. Are you the one who is to come to bring to fulfillment this glorious vision of God's presence that took such a crooked path through the people of Israel? Are you the one who is to come, or are we waiting for another? And if we're waiting for another, what are we waiting for? And if we're not, why are we not listening more deeply to the one we proclaim as Lord of the universe, the one in whose presence we find the secret to be set free, where our own regeneration will commence, our lameness will be overcome, and our blindness will go away, and we'll begin to hear, and even the dead places in us will come to life. Do we want that? Or are we waiting for something else? Are we waiting for something else? I kind of want the dead to come to life and the blind to see and the deaf to hear again. And by all accounts, it is as near as our own heart and as near as the face into which I gaze. It's right here. The Christmas story is not about the future. It's about Emmanuel. God really is with us. But do we trust that? Or are we waiting for something else?
Amen.